What would you do if the person who was supposed to love you most locked you out in a snowstorm, laughing while you froze, never knowing that every brick of the mansion behind him belonged to you? This is the story of Clara Whitfield, and it begins on the coldest night of her life. The snow had been falling since late afternoon. By 9 o'clock, it was coming down in thick, heavy curtains, the kind that swallowed streetlights whole and turned the world into a silent, white blur. Clara stood on the front steps of the Whitfield estate, a sprawling stone manor on the edge of Westbrook, Connecticut, with her coat pulled tight across her chest and her fingers trembling, so hard she could barely hold her purse. She had been at her mother's funeral. 3 days of quiet grief, soft-voiced relatives, and the particular exhaustion that comes from holding yourself together when everything inside you wants to fall apart. She had driven 2 hours through that storm to get home. She had not eaten since morning, and now she stood at her own front door, pressing the bell again and again, watching the warm amber light glow behind the frosted glass like something just out of reach. Nobody answered. She tried the door handle, locked. She stepped back and looked up at the second-floor windows. The lights were on. Music drifted faintly through the stone walls, something jazzy and celebratory, and there were shadows moving behind the curtains. Her husband Marcus was home. That much was clear. She pulled out her phone and called him. He didn't answer. She called again. Still nothing. Clara wrapped her arms around herself and tried to think clearly through the cold. Her coat, a soft gray fleece she had grabbed on the way out the door 3 days ago, had not been made for a night like this. The snow was settling in her hair, melting against her neck, seeping through the weave of the fabric. Her feet, in simple leather flats, were already soaking. She moved to the side of the house and tapped on the kitchen window. Nothing. She went around to the garden entrance and found it bolted from the inside. She pressed herself against the exterior wall beneath the drawing room window for a moment, just long enough to catch her breath, and that is when she saw them. Marcus stood just inside the window, laughing, the full, wide-open laugh she had not seen from him in months. He was dressed in his black tuxedo, the one he wore to charity galas and law firm dinners. Beside him stood a woman in a red dress, holding a champagne flute, her head tilted back with delight at something he had said. His hand was close to hers, too close. He pointed toward the window, toward the dark outside, and they both laughed harder. Clara did not move. She stood in the snow, soaking and shivering, and she watched her husband laugh at a joke she could not hear, in a house she had never truly been allowed to rest in, beside a woman who was not her. The cold was extraordinary. It pressed against her skin like something with intent, but something else settled over her in that moment too, something quieter and older than anger. It was clarity, the kind of clarity that only comes when the last thing you were pretending wasn't true finally reveals itself in plain sight. She turned and walked back to her car. Clara had inherited the Whitfield estate 18 months before she married. Marcus Webb, her grandmother, Eleanor Whitfield, had built the original property from a modest insurance settlement in 1961, expanded it twice over the following decades, and left it, along with its surrounding 12 acres, its investment accounts, its art collection, and its mineral rights, entirely to Clara when she passed. The estate had been appraised, at the time of the inheritance, at just under $80 million. Clara had told Marcus about it, of course. On their third date, she had explained, quietly and without drama, that she had inherited significant family wealth. But she had also done what her grandmother had always advised. She had kept her name on everything. The deed, the accounts, the trusts, all of it remained in the name of Clara Elaine Whitfield, as it always had been. Marcus had insisted on managing the household early in the marriage. He suggested it would be simpler if he handled the bills, the maintenance contracts, the staff schedules. Clara had agreed because she was busy with her consulting work and because she trusted him, and because she had not yet understood that some people interpret trust as an opening. Over 2 years, Marcus had quietly come to believe, or perhaps he had chosen to believe, that the estate was his domain. He had never read the original deed with care. He had never asked to see the trust documents. He had assumed, the way people sometimes do when money is nearby and questions feel awkward, that proximity meant ownership. It did not. Clara sat in her car in the driveway, heater running, and made 2 phone calls. The first was to her attorney, James Hargrove, who picked up on the Second ring despite the hour and listened without interruption while she explained what she needed. The second was to the Westbrook Police Department's non-emergency line. She explained calmly that she had been locked out of her residence, that she was the sole legal owner of the property, and that she had documentation to confirm this. She gave the address. She gave her name. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. The door opened from the inside. Before the officers had finished climbing the front steps, Marcus stood in the doorway in his tuxedo, looking first at the police and then slowly at Clara, at her wet hair, her soaked coat, her perfectly steady expression. "Clara," he said it like a question. "Good evening, Marcus." One of the officers, a tall woman named Garza, asked to confirm property ownership before proceeding. Clara produced her phone and opened a scanned copy of the deed, then pulled up the trust document her attorney had already sent over. Officer Garza reviewed it briefly. Then she looked at Marcus. "Sir, are you a co-owner of this property?" Marcus opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Clara again, searching for something in her face, some sign that this was a misunderstanding, some indication that she would soften. "Explain it away, laugh it off." Clara looked back at him with calm, tired eyes. "No," she said, answering the question herself. "He is not." What followed was not dramatic. That is perhaps the most important thing to say about it. Clara did not shout. She did not cry. She did not confront the woman in the red dress, who slipped out through the kitchen entrance while the officers were still in the foyer. There was nothing to confront, really. The truth had already done everything that needed doing. Marcus left that night with 2 suitcases. He stood in the snow, in his tuxedo, without a proper winter coat, while Clara held the door open and waited. His expression cycled through several emotions she recognized and had once, in another life, known how to respond to. But that was before the snowstorm, before the window, before the laughing. She did not explain her feelings to him. She had spent 2 years explaining herself. She was done with that particular exercise. When the door closed, the house was quiet. Clara stood in the entryway for a long moment, listening to the old familiar sounds of the manor settling around her, the low hum of the heating system, the tick of the grandfather clock in the drawing room, the faint, distant whisper of snow against stone. She walked to the kitchen and made herself a cup of tea. She sat at the table where her grandmother had once sat, in a house her grandmother had built, and she let the warmth spread slowly from her hands into her chest. Outside, the snow continued to fall, softly now, almost gently, as though the worst of it had already passed. And maybe it had. Some doors, when they close, do not leave you locked out. Some doors, when they close, finally let you back in.